Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jim Knotts, the President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, and it is my pleasure to be the first to welcome you all to the annual Veterans Day Observance at the Wall on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Fund, the staff, the volunteers here at the Wall, and of course, our founder and president emeritus, Jan Scruggs, who I have not seen here today, but we always remember at these ceremonies here at the Wall. Before I introduce our master of ceremonies, and as people are still finding the way to the seats, I have a few groups here with us today that I'd like to recognize. First of all, we have a family making their first visit to the Wall since their loved one's name was added to the Wall in 2015. Please welcome the family of Charlie Vernon Stanley. If you could stand up wherever you are. I know you're here. Right here in the middle. Thank you. I would also like to recognize all of the Gold Star family members we have with us here today. The mothers, spouses, fathers, siblings, and the sons and daughters in touch. All those who have experienced the loss of a loved one and know all too well the sacrifices that our military families make. And finally, to those still waiting for the return of their loved ones who are listed as missing, thank you for joining us here today. We're making a little history here today as we have the first all Native American honor flight here with us all the way from Nevada. For those that are able, please stand and be recognized. The honor flight, please stand. Thank you. To all of you, and to all of our Vietnam veterans here today, welcome home. Welcome home from our nation. Welcome home to your memorial. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Wall volunteers. These are the National Park Service volunteers, the ones in the fancy yellow hats who stand at this wall day after day throughout the year. They are the primary face of the Wall to the visitors, the 5.6 million visitors that come here every year. And their service is tireless and unending, and we simply couldn't do what we do without their help. Thank you. And my last thank you goes to our sponsor for today's ceremony, the Xerox Foundation. Thank you for helping us make today's ceremony possible. It is a fact that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund couldn't do what we do without support of corporations and individuals that make it possible. Thank you. And before I begin our program today, I want to pause and recognize our POWs and MIAs. I call your attention to our POW MIA chair, which occupies a place of dignity and honor on our stage. Let us always remember and never forget their sacrifices. Now I'd like to introduce today's Master of Ceremonies, General Barry McCaffrey. General McCaffrey served in the U.S. Army for 32 years, and when he retired in 1996, he was the most decorated general serving in the Army at the time, earning 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 3 Purple Hearts, and 2 Silver Stars for valor. He served overseas for more than 12 years with 4 combat tours, one with the 82nd Airborne Division, one the Vietnamese Airborne Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and during the Persian Gulf, commanding the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division. Please welcome General Barry McCaffrey.
Thanks very much, Jim. Thanks for that great introduction. Well, Jim, thanks for that introduction. It surely was a better send-off and endorsement than Sergeant Richard Dorsey said to me just as I was introduced. He said, "Don't screw it up." Look, it's a real honor for Jill and I to be here again at the Vietnam Memorial, take part in this wonderful day. It's been just tremendously moving over the years to see the development. So now we got thousands of our Vietnam veterans either here with us today or watching it, streaming video, or learning about it through the media. Take special note. Are there any Army veterans out there? How about our fellow fighters, the Marines? How about the Navy, without which we wouldn't have ever made it over or back? How about the Air Force? I wish I'd been in the Air Force. How about our Coast Guard people? Thanks for your service. Peace and war. And I won't ask the CIA and the other intelligence service to identify yourself, but thanks for taking part in the battle with us throughout the whole area. It's an honor to serve as the Master of Ceremonies today. We're going to start our program, as we should, with an invocation. Please welcome Major John E. Scott, Chaplain, U.S. Army, assigned to Fort Myer, Virginia, who will lead us in the invocation.
Please bow with me in prayer. Lord God, thank you that we can gather here today in this sacred place to honor some of our nation's living and fallen heroes. We come together this afternoon not to reflect on death, but to remember life. We gather here to remember lives marked by special service and sacrifice. The Vietnam War forever changed the way our country would view warfare. The environment was rugged, the weather conditions extreme, and the enemy unpredictable. The Bible tells us that no greater love has anyone than this, that one lay down one's life for one's friends. Each name on this wall represents a person who gave his or her life, not only for friends, but also for strangers, for their families and their nation. Father, your word says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So we ask for your comforting presence to be with us here today, with those who are here who served, and with the families of every person represented on this wall. And we pray all these things in your name. Amen.
Well, Chaplain, thank you for that invocation. And more importantly, for both your military and your spiritual leadership of our soldiers and their families. I'd now like to introduce the Army Color Guard from the Military District of Washington for our presentation of the colors. Color Guard, please present the colors. Now to sing the national anthem, please welcome Staff Sergeant Matthew Richardson, the United States Army Chorus.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home
Sergeant Richardson, that was utterly magnificent. And now let's welcome Richard Dorsey, former Sergeant, U.S. Army, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Color Guard, retire the colors. Remain standing until we've got them off. All right, we go ahead and be seated. Is he going to remain up there? Oh, yeah, okay. And 1st Cavalry also retire the colors. Gary Owen. I should have given you a little bio detail on Sergeant Richard Dorsey, 20-year-old buck sergeant, combat infantry soldier in my company in Vietnam. And, you know, we got the whole reunion group here. B Company, 2nd, 7th, 68, 69. Stand up here and let us give you a round of applause. A lot of grandchildren and children and... You know, it's a comment on that Vietnam War. At the height of the Vietnam War, there were 14% of the armed forces were draftees. Get that number. 25% of the forces in country in '68 were draftees. B Company, 2nd and 7th was mostly 100% draftees. You see, me and the 1st Sergeant Emerson Trainer. They're terrific soldiers. Sergeant Dorsey, 20-year-old buck sergeant. All these instant NCOs are just fabulous. Last night I was listening to the conversation around the room, and they're all roaring and laughing. I said, "What are you laughing about?" Well, Sergeant Dorsey got hit right through the helmet with a machine gun about 10 feet away. Bam! Down he went. I thought he was dead. Then there were roars of laughter as the medics pulled him into cover, took his helmet off. The bullet had come in one side of the helmet, up over the top and out the other side, leaving a giant scoop on his head. And when the medics thought that was funny, the firefight going on. Bunch of teenagers, great soldiers. We've been having these reunions for years. I want to thank the media for being here, not only the visual media in the back of the room, but thanks for your presence. 350,000 killed and wounded during the course of the war. There's a lot of lessons that are important for the American people there. The way you get the lessons out is you talk to the media. We're really proud of the way they've told this story. By the way, Military Times is here. Rob Wilcox in the front row, Army Times, Navy, the hometown newspaper for those on active duty. They also publish Vietnam Magazine. Make sure you know about that. That's your magazine. There's some great stories. They just interviewed Colin Powell for the last issue. And manager David Smith is here making sure that the active armed forces knows all about their veterans. Jim Knotts, our CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, with his tiny staff, 17 people, keeps this enormous enterprise going all across the country. It's not just a series of ceremonies here at the wall. It's a traveling wall, it's a virtual wall, it's all sorts of new initiatives. And we thank them. But it reminds me, he was a Desert Storm veteran. And he said, you know, when we came home from Desert Storm, you Vietnam veterans welcomed us home. So, you know, it's just important, our influence on how the country sees their armed forces. There's a bunch of other reunion groups, too many to mention. We're going to have some of them recognized later on, but I do thank all the Gold Star mothers in particular for being here, and those who have lost loved ones, and those that are still worried about the missing in action. Luckily, we're slowly winding down that population. Look, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund hosts this ceremony each year here in partnership with the National Park Service, an underfunded, superb federal agency that runs these magnificent national parks all across the country, urban, rural, whatever. Thank God for their work. You know, our speaker today is Gay Vitsky, who just took over a year and a half ago this responsibility. She was in Philadelphia last. She's a 20-year career Park Service employee. Her husband's a Park Service employee. And I reminded her, when people see her uniform, we like the agency behind it. So if you will, join me in welcoming Gay Vitsky, the superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll also tell you, you heard my last post was in Philadelphia before coming here, but 2 posts before that I was at Fort McHenry National Monument in Baltimore, the home of our national anthem, and that was a remarkable rendition. Thank you. So good afternoon. On behalf of the National Park Service, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Veterans Day at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial here on the National Mall. I'd like to welcome our visitors, the distinguished guests, families, friends, and especially all the members of our armed forces and veterans who are here today with us. We are deeply honored that you're here with us today. I know that family and friends have traveled across the country to pay tribute to their loved ones, and we're honored that you're all here with us as well. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is one of the most visited sites on the National Mall. I'm sure that comes as no surprise, but it's also one of the most visited, in fact, in Washington, D.C., and certainly one of the most beloved places on the mall. The memorial provides us an opportunity to explore lessons of the past and to probe questions that people continue to ask about war, survival, healing, and the fundamental reasons behind why we fight. We in the National Park Service are honored to be entrusted with the care of this place and to welcome the millions of visitors who come here each year. It's also our honor to care for the Vietnam Women's Memorial that recognizes the 265,000 women, all volunteers, who served during the war as well. I'd like to take this opportunity to say a few thank yous. First, to our remarkable partners in this endeavor, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, especially its president and CEO, Jim Knotts, and Diane Carlson Evans, founder of the Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. These 2 individuals and their organizations represent instrumental partners in helping the National Park Service with its work here at this memorial on behalf of all of you and future generations, and we owe them our deepest gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. I also want to take this chance, this opportunity to recognize the National Park Service staff and volunteers They are the folks who interpret this place, who maintain this place, who welcome visitors here every year. And it is only through their remarkable work that we are able to educate the more than 5.5 million visitors who come to the wall each year. So a big round of thanks to the National Park Service staff and volunteers. Thank you. As the National Park Service marks its centennial anniversary this year, that's right, we've turned 100 this year. We are looking forward to the next century, our second century of service to the American people. And service is really critical to us. It's an important theme within the National Park Service, not only because it's what we believe we provide to the public, so much so it's in our name, but also because here on the National Mall, service is a critical part of the stories that we share, the service of our veterans to this country. And at places like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the Vietnam Women's Memorial, and the Korean War Memorial, and the World War II Memorial, and the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial, all of which are part of the family of parks that we manage. We are deeply proud to share the stories of the men and women who have served our country for more than 240 years. And we hope that we help the over 33 million visitors who come here annually to understand that service, bravery, the sacrifice of those individuals, and how that has shaped our nation. We are very proud that among the employees of the National Park Service, there are many veterans of America's armed forces who continue to serve their country now in a new uniform. Employees like James Pierce, who's a combat wounded veteran from Iraq, who is now one of our volunteer coordinators and maybe has worked with many of you on service projects on the mall, or Park Ranger Mark Morse, who's a 10-year Army veteran who served in Afghanistan and now oversees the monthly washing of the wall for us. We're very proud that veterans play a significant role here in the care and administration of our monuments and memorials. So today on Veterans Day, I encourage all of you to seek solace and healing and inspiration, not just at this memorial, but at the many other sites on the National Mall that recognize and pay tribute to America's heroes. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial and others like it provide an important reminder of our nation's commitment to its veterans and give all of us a tangible way to recognize those who have served and those who continue to serve our great nation, reminding all Americans of our common heritage of service and sacrifice. Thank you. Happy Veterans Day.
Well done, Gay. Nice work, Dan. Thanks very much. Gay, thanks for those wonderful words, and more importantly, your service and your leadership and being in charge, really, of this sacred ground. You know, people say that not lightly. This is really the ultimate place of honor in America, and we're very grateful for what the Park Service does, along with the volunteers and the people that contribute money to make sure we can keep the staff and pay for the upkeep to keep this place beautiful. There's people down here 24 hours a day. A lot of you know that. And a lot of them see a volunteer the minute they walk down the sidewalk out there. So again, Gay, thanks for your leadership. It's now really my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Debbie Alexander Moore. And normally we have the founder of the Women's Memorial here with us, Diane Carlson Evans. She was called away with important family business. She was the founder. When that monument opened, along with the three soldiers and the flag, it made more complete this memorial. We had thousands of women that served with us in combat in various roles, from Janice Nark, U.S. Army nurse, air traffic controllers, all sorts of specialty positions. And by the way, it included the so-called donut dollies, all college graduate young women who came over there voluntarily. We have a donut dolly joining us tonight for supper with my reunion coming. There you are. 1968, Fire Base Sioux. Two of these beautiful young women showed up and wanted to play games with a bunch of tongue-tied 19-year-old combat infantrymen who I had to order out of their bunkers and go over there and talk to them. But it was really wonderful, the outsized contribution that women made to our fight in Vietnam. So Debbie Alexander Moore is going to speak on behalf of the Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. She served 2 tours in Vietnam in what was then called Army Special Services. Today it's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. She operated in, that service operated 14 base camps throughout Vietnam. And unlike many of us, she stayed on for a second tour. Debbie's dad, who's still living, I think at age 96, she told me, she's the oldest daughter of an Army Air Corps B-29 commander who flew 13 combat missions over Japan during World War II. And so at age 21, Debbie was the youngest woman to deploy to Vietnam with Army Special Services. Please welcome our Women's Memorial Speaker, Debbie Alexander Moore. Thank you very much again.
Let's see if I'm. First of all, thank you, General McCaffrey. 48 years ago, I could not have imagined coming here to recount the most dramatic decision I ever made, going to Vietnam. Vietnam, her hard-working local nationals, their endearing children, the new sights, sounds, smells, and afternoon monsoon storms, and the scary times when the Viet Cong decided to fire rockets and mortars at us. Then there were the men in uniform walking around with guns. Oh, sorry, they're weapons. For those of you who understand that. Fortunately, most were great people who were ready to instruct, scold, guide, protect, and forgive us when we occasionally went outside the wire on unauthorized helicopter rides or mistook a command sergeant major for a general. Well, as the oldest in a family of 4 daughters and no sons, I began my adventure shortly after graduation from San Francisco State. Before following my parents in a teaching career, I wanted to travel, and I was aware of several of my male classmates headed to Vietnam. I'd always been adventuresome, and I wanted to serve my country, just as my father had done in World War II. Well, I met a recruiter who told me about Army Special Services, girls, who operated recreation facilities worldwide for the enlisted man. And yes, we were called girls in those days. She said they offered daily activities and events accompanied by endless supplies of coffee and snacks and so forth. More importantly, she stressed that the girls were there to offer a little home away from home for our enlisted men who were there so they could relax away from their officers and NCOs. Well, 4 months later, I was in a C-130 cargo plane headed to Soc Trang, the tiny, tiny little airfield deep in the Mekong Delta. The plane was filled with wooden pallets, and the only other passenger on the plane was my area supervisor, Ricky, who wanted to introduce me to my new boss, the club director. She said Louise and I would be the only 2 girls on an airfield of about 400 men, and that Louise was anxious to get me trained because she needed to go on R&R. Well, when the C-130 slammed down on this short PSP runway at Soc Trang, I looked out the window and I saw these deuce-and-a-half trucks and these 3/4-ton trucks following us, where we stopped. And Ricky said, "Look, Debbie, all these guys are so excited to see you." Well, that excitement lasted about 30 seconds because then we quickly learned the compound had been without beer for 2 weeks. And our cargo was actually pallets of beer. So you guys can appreciate that. The first few days were really intense on the job training because I'd received very little the first 2 days in Saigon beforehand. I learned that we were to be at our rec centers or service clubs, as some of you guys remember, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, offering welcoming smiles, a sympathetic ear, And we often played the big sister role to young men who felt uncomfortable talking with their leaders or their buddies about troubling events in their lives. Such things as family illnesses and wives in financial distress. And occasionally there was tragically the Dear John letter that they had to deal with. One of my favorite activities was hosting orphans parties, and many of our units asked their family members to send toys and other special bits of clothing and things from the States. Our soldiers would simply melt at the sight of these little ones as they sang and danced for us. Sadly, there was a toddler at one of our first parties that I noticed who was missing both her hands. The nun who ran the orphanage told me that the Viet Cong had come through her village quite some time ago, shaking down the residents for rice, and her family had none to give them, so they took their youngest child and cut her hands off. So then she became a little orphan in our special little orphanage. I have her picture, I took it, I keep her picture in my bedroom and look at it nearly every day. One wish I will always have is to know what happened to her. After 6 months at Sok Trang and having to deal with the loss of 6 very special friends who were KIA, killed in action, I was transferred to Cu Chi, home of the 25th Division. Even though it was a much larger base, the enemy managed to find us, and I experienced forever my first ground attack in February of '69, where we lost 14 men and 9 Chinook helicopters. I was scheduled to go to Korea to finish my obligation to special services, but when I got home to California, I just felt like I hadn't finished what I needed to do in Vietnam, so I volunteered to go back. Well, did we girls make any difference? It's hard to know, but let me share one personal story. One night, a sandy-haired GI came in the club and asked me for some stationery. I gave it to him, and I could tell he was really agitated. And I asked him what was wrong, and he finally told me that he'd just come in from the field, and his unit had lost several men. He also said towards the end of this that his squad was entering what was to be called a friendly village. And a little girl about 8 years old came out to greet the squad, and she gave the squad leader a bouquet of flowers. And when his squad leader bent down to accept the flowers, they detonated a C4 pack explosive on the little girl's chest and blew her up and killed the squad leader and wounded several other of the guys in his squad. He was so upset that, and so enraged that he said he'd lost all trust and he wanted to take out, every Vietnamese that he saw. I talked with him quite some time, and the only comfort I have, and hopefully I was some comfort to him, was he did agree to see his unit chaplain. I also remember hundreds of others, including my sisters in service, GIs that I loved for all they did, and local nationals who profoundly affected my outlook on life. So much of what I am today, I learned from them, and they will always have a handprint on my heart. When I look at this hallowed wall, I touch the names of the friends that I knew who lost their lives in Vietnam, but I also think about the thousands of other soldiers I spoke with during those 2 years, and I just wonder how many of their names are etched on that wall that I'll never know. Vietnam was the most significant experience of my life, and I'm so grateful to have been able to serve with some of the bravest, hardest working, and compassionate men and women I have ever known. In closing, I love this wall, and thanks to Diane Carlson Evans, our beautiful women's memorial across the way. I came to its dedication in 1993 and returned in 2013, where, by chance, I was reunited after 45 years with my personal hero, who is now my husband, Doug. In my mind, the Women's Memorial will forever be a healing, magical, and a beautiful reminder of the role we women played in Vietnam, whether we were nurses, Army Special Services, donut dollies, or any of the other women groups serving there. And for all of you that served and your family members and those currently in service, I thank you and honor you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. A special thanks to Debbie Alexander Moore, speaking on behalf of all of the women that served in various roles in Vietnam. Before we proceed, we have something special here. It's why I'm back up here instead of our Master of Ceremonies, General McCaffrey. Before we do that, I want to welcome Undersecretary of the VA, Richard Shulkin. I'm not sure where you are, sir. If you would just raise your hand so you can be recognized. Here you are, sir. Thank you to you and all of your colleagues and all of the things you're doing around the country and around the world to support our veterans. And now I'm going to ask General McCaffrey to leave the stage. He's actually going to go over and participate in a special presentation we have here. We are going to do a special presentation in conjunction with one of our partner nonprofits, the organization called Purple Hearts Reunited, that returns Medals of Valor to veterans and their families. Sadly, shamefully, many Purple Heart medals are being sold by collectors or even through online auction sites. Medals associated with someone in a famous battle are often sold for thousands of dollars. Purple Hearts Reunited was founded from a notion that these medals of valor belong with the recipients or their families. And for those of us who have worn the uniform of our nation, we understand what it means to earn a Purple Heart Medal. We give special respect for our comrades who have left part of their life's blood on the fields of battle in service to our nation. So today, we will return a Purple Heart to a family. Lieutenant Commander Wallace Graham Murphy is a triple threat. He served during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and was highly decorated. In Vietnam, he was the officer in charge of Task Force 115, a mobile riverine force that worked directly with special operations, conducting surveillance and infiltration missions near Nha Trang. His medals were rescued from a military collector, and today will be returned to his 3 daughters. I now turn your attention to Major Zachary Fike, the founder of Purple Hearts Reunited, along with General McCaffrey, as the family comes forward. And we return Commander Murphy's Purple Heart to his daughter, Bev Smith, along with her sisters, Carol Solinsky and Connie Tambourine. And we also have about 15 or 20 members of the family here, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the commander here as well. So welcome to the whole family, and thank you for allowing us to recognize your father and his service in front of the wall.
Yeah, that's quite a story. Major Zach Fike, who is standing up here so proudly, Vermont National Guard, multiple combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, badly wounded, fighting in the war on terrorism, Purple Heart recipient himself, and he came out to start this effort by himself. backed up by his spouse, we think. A lot of 20-hour-a-day job. And they were supported by the Military Order of the Purple Heart with a grant of money to go out there and get these Purple Heart medals back and get them back to the family. So we thank the Military Order of the Purple Heart also for your support for his effort. Look, my major responsibility and a personal pleasure for me is to introduce our keynote speaker today, Major General Charlie F. Bolden Jr., U.S. Marine Corps retired. And by the way, I told Charlie what I wouldn't do is I went down and gave a talk at Quantico to the advanced course down there. And I told the commandant, the two-star general running the school, I said, you know, how much I wanted to be a Marine. And my wife told me I couldn't be a Marine because she'd never see me, so I'd have to go in the airborne like her dad. And so when the guy got up to introduce me, he said, you know, he said, you just retired as a four-star Army general. He said, we're really proud you're here. If you joined the Marine Corps, you'd be a retired major today. And a proud one at that, if I joined the Marine Corps. Look, Major General Bolden was nominated by the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the 12th Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. And he's led that team to advance the mission and goals of U.S. space program brilliantly, diligently, with inadequate resources during his term in office. And we thank him for what he's done for one of the most important scientific and national programs the country runs. He's a Naval Academy grad, class of 1968, commissioned as a Marine Second Lieutenant, completed flight training in 1970, and became a naval aviator after that. From our perspective, we got to remember he flew over 100 combat missions up north in the big strikes, Laos, Cambodia. So he put his life on the line, 72 and 73, as a Marine combat aviator. His 34-year career with the Marine Corps included 14 years as a member of the astronaut office of NASA. He joined the office in 1980. Listen to this. He was joined the travel to orbit 4 times aboard the space shuttle. 4 missions into space, commanded 2 of these missions, and piloted the other 2. He returned to the Marine Corps, his beloved Marine Corps, for several years before retiring finally from the military, and eventually made his way back to public service in this extremely demanding and complex responsibility. We're proud of our Marine Corps. We're proud of Major General Charlie Bolden. Join me in welcoming him to the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much, and thank you very much, General McCaffrey. You know, for somebody like me, I am humbled. I think it ought to be the other way around. I ought to be introducing General McCaffrey. So I am incredibly honored to have you bring me to the podium. The other person I want to thank is Jim Knotts. You don't meet very many people with his persistence and tenacity. He has tried to get me to this event for a number of years. He never gave up, and I am so appreciative that he did not give up. To my fellow Marines who are with us today, on the day after we celebrated the 241st anniversary of our Corps yesterday, Semper Fi. Huh! To all the veterans who are with us, as well as all the active servicemen and women, thank you for your service. To all of you here in the audience, thank you for keeping the memory and the legacy alive of our heroes who are forever a part of this national mall and our national heritage and character. The heroes whose names are inscribed on this wall. There's great symbolism in the fact that we take time today recalling the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. We recall that time on that day when an armistice or a temporary cessation of hostilities was declared between Allied nations and Germany in the First World War, then known as the Great War. These 24 hours of historical observance has become one of the most important days in the life of our democracy. This has become a day when men and women from all walks of life line up in schoolhouses and libraries and senior centers and participate in local parades to celebrate the sacrifices of those who have chosen to serve our nation as members of a unique group of brothers and sisters in arms. As President Obama said in his remarks earlier this afternoon at the Arlington Cemetery, when the world around us would make us cynical, we can always look to the veterans to provide the example for true American spirit. Because of your sacrifices, a few days ago, we were able to exercise one of our most sacred rights, the right to vote, and then exercise the peaceful transition of power, something that sets us apart from almost every other nation in the world. This moving and inspirational wall before which we stand is one symbol and one segment of that unique group of veterans, a group who chose to make the ultimate sacrifice that we might enjoy the unalienable rights of being citizens of these United States. The heroic men and women whose names are inscribed on this wall represent the best of our nation, who left their homes in towns, large and small, to take up arms in a far-off land that we might continue to live in freedom. They gave their lives so that all of us might continue to live in this freedom. They gave their lives not just for the present, but for the future, for their own children and grandchildren, and for millions of faces they would never see, millions of souls they would never meet, for future generations who would share with them the most sacred and important title anyone can have the privilege to hold, the title of American. Like so many of you, I have far too many friends, far too many brothers and sisters in arms whose names are etched on this wall. These names, more than 58,000 of them, are more than letters carved in stone. Each represents a soul. Each represents someone who was someone else's entire world. They represent husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, cousins, congregants, best friends, Little League coaches, bowling partners, poker buddies, classmates, long-lost loves, soulmates, mentors, scoutmasters, deacons, soldiers, sailors, airmen and women, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen and women, heroes all. Each of us has memories etched on this wall. All of our lives have been shaped by the ways in which these heroic men and women impacted our own lives. The poet John Greenleaf Whittier writes, and I quote, "For all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been," unquote. As we mourn for those we lost, we mourn as well for all that might have been, all the contributions they could have made. In this sense, Veterans Day is also a time to celebrate the many contributions that veterans make to our country today, contributions that benefit our families and communities in every conceivable way. At NASA, we are some of the beneficiaries of veterans' continued service to community and country. So many of our astronauts and other members of our family are veterans and active service members. We are not alone. As I speak today, veterans are continuing to serve the greater good in every corner of our country. They are starting businesses and teaching students, training for charity runs and running charities, coaching at boys and girls clubs, and raising boys and girls of their own. They're working as doctors and engineers, and yes, as astronauts and cabinet secretaries and administrators too. Their service is perhaps the highest tribute of all to the more than 58,000 lives we honor today by our presence at this hallowed wall. Lives that continue to matter today, souls that we continue to hold dear and forever remain a part of us. May God bless their memory, and may God bless our great United States of America.
Very powerful word. Thank you very much. Well, General Bolin, thank you for those really superb words. And more importantly, thanks for your leadership from the front throughout your lifetime of public service as a Marine flyer and as a space person with NASA. I'm reminded, by the way, some of you were probably here when we got the first Marine I think we brought down here, Jim, was General Pete Pace, and he's chairman of the JCS. And he's a personal friend. I greatly admire him. He was a Marine rifle platoon leader in the fighting in Hue in 1968. And he stood up here and had all his Marine medals on, full of medals. He had no speech, and the only thing he did was he recited from memory the names of the 28, if I remember, Marines that had been killed in action in his platoon. Very powerful man. Thank God for the United States Marine Corps. Well, look, what you're seeing now is we're directing your attention to representatives of several of our nation's leading veteran service organizations. And they're all going to go down and they're going to present some wreaths. It's the best part of this ceremony. It's drawing our attention back to the 58,000 plus killed in action whose names are on that wall. It's been a great tradition of laying wreaths at the Vietnam Memorial in honor of those who lost their lives. While they're getting into positions, let me give you a quick update on some of the many things that Jim Knotts and his small staff have got going on. It's been a really busy year, 2016. Jim came in, took the reins of the CEO's job. Jan Strug is now our emeritus chairman. Thank God is his role as founder in getting this memorial built. But now we've got to go into the long-term organization and the outreach. And Jim has done just that. Our money is in order. He's got a small staff of very highly selected people. A couple of things. First of all, we're looking for a photograph of every one of the names of the fallen that are on this wall. We're going to try and tie those names to sacrifice, duty, honor, country. And we've done pretty well. We're down to about 10,000 photos we still lack to meet our goal of having one for every name on the wall. So just as a reminder, please, if you have access to families who might have some of our missing photos, make sure you round them up and we make it part of an irrevocable history. Secondly, I just want to remind you, I guess we've inducted 312 Vietnam veterans into the Memory Honor Roll. And that Memory Honor Roll honors the men and women who served in Vietnam and later died as a result of their service. And each year, VVMF inducts them into the honor roll on the Saturday of Father's Day. And it's a very difficult day to come down here. Beautiful ceremony. Looking ahead, 2017, 35 years. I was here when this thing first opened. Very different environment. 35 years in 2017. So Jim Knott and his staff have got a bunch of wonderful things planned. We're going to try and make sure that gets institutionalized so that 58,315 service members who sacrificed all in Vietnam will be honored forever. This is, as you know, the most visited memorial in the country. It's changed the way people remember tragic loss. And yet, in the case of this memorial, you know, I tell the media all the time, never call a soldier or service member killed in action a victim. They're not victims. They're fighters. They're American patriots. And that's what this memorial has done. There's a lot of special events going on during 2017. One of the things we're going to do, mark in your calendar, mental as it may be, November 7 through 10, 2017, we're going to do the reading of the names of those on the wall. It's a special day. They're also, we hopefully be able to do the allies too. I'm certainly endorsing Korea and Australia and the allies that stayed with us during that long, bitter fight, and we depended on so much. So we'll read every name on the wall next year, November 7th through 10th. We know everybody can't come to this memorial, and so the VVMF staff has put together and recently launched a virtual tour of the memorial, vvmf.org. Make a note of that. Go check it out. It's powerful. That's a way our children, our grandchildren will learn about this conflict. So the app is up and running. There is a new app for the wall. It's available if you have an iPhone already, and shortly the staff will have the Android-based phone done. It's the Wall app, allows you to look up names, learn about the wall, and most importantly, learn about the people whose names are on that wall, so they remain a lifetime example. Now let me, if I can, I think we've got everybody into place, read the names of the organizations as they lay their wreaths. If everyone could please stand, if you're able, let's stand up and recognize these people. And bagpiper Chris Jackson will play Amazing Grace at today's ceremony, and we'll close with the playing of taps by Staff Sergeant John Polison of the United States Army Band. First, the wreath from the National Park Service. Next, the presentation by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. The Vietnam Women's Memorial. The Gold Star Wives of America. The American Gold Star Mothers. Operation Freedom Bird. Sons and Daughters in Touch. The 1st Cavalry Division Association, Gary Owen. The Vietnam Veterans of America. The 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry Association. The Associates of Vietnam Veterans of America. The Military Order of the Purple Heart. The Jewish War Veterans of the USA. Honor Flight, Nevada. The Paralyzed Veterans of America. Wreaths Across America. The Veterans of Foreign Wars. The 25th Infantry Division Association. The 71st Anniversary U.S. Army Officer Candidate School Alumni. The National Dusters, Quads, and Searchlights Association. The Quezon Veterans. 3rd Battalion, 8th Infantry, Ivy Dragoons. The Verizon Veterans Advisory Board. The Tonsanute Association. Military Times. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, PTSD, Class Washington. The 101st Airborne Division Association. the American Legion, the Vietnam Veterans Motorcycle Club of Maryland, and finally, all other organizations that are here with us today, we recognize your presence. We ask the audience members remain standing and at attention until taps has been played and the honor guard has been dismissed. Honor Guard, you are dismissed. We probably ought to pause a bit here and let them leave. Then you can flood down. If you signed up for public tour beginning at 2:30, by the way, you can congregate at the 3 servicemen statue near the flagpole. And that does conclude our ceremony. And to John Dibble, the chairman of the board, and Jim Knotts, the CEO, thanks for bringing us all together here. God bless.